Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Diversity Matters, where we will be focusing in today on unpacking stereotypes. Our host and moderator for this evening is Reverend Vicki Hughes, who will introduce today's segment.
Good evening. This is our fifth conversation of Diversity Matters. And I have my panel with me tonight. And we have one guest panelist, Reverend Yolanda Alston Foster. And as was announced, our topic tonight is truth, preference, bias, unpacking stereotypes. I want to define stereotype first, and then we'll get started talking about some stereotypes and how they affect us, and possibly try to figure out where they came from and how we can combat stereotypes. First, a stereotype is defined as a widely held but fixed and oversimplified image or idea of a particular type of person or a thing. Stereotypes are beliefs about people. The beliefs are usually based on their physical attributes, religion, lifestyle, ethnicity, or gender. The origin of these beliefs stem from a person's own ignorance, their narrow-mindedness, or past experiences with a person or a group of people. And just to define an ethnic stereotype or racial stereotype, that is a system of beliefs about typical characteristics of members of a given ethnic group or nationality, their status, society, and cultural norms. And all of these stereotypes can form social expectations and often low expectations, in my opinion. Stereotypes can be positive or negative. Positive stereotypes make people feel good and give them something to strive for. For instance, a lot of times we hear girls are good at math, and that actually could boost their confidence and could increase their interest in the subject of math and actually steer them towards math careers. When we think of negative stereotypes, when we believe those negative stereotypes about a group of people, we aren't recognizing and embracing differences amongst them, the people. And that's very narrow-minded, and it's not a good thing. If a boss, for instance, believes that all people of a certain race are thieves, that boss is highly unlikely to hire anybody from that group. And that's not a good thing. Negative stereotypes can shape a person's perceptions of who he or she is, and they can affect a person for a long time or a lifetime, actually. Sometimes we aren't even aware that one or more stereotypes have shaped how we interact with or avoid certain people. So that's my brief introduction. So let's chat, panelists. And also, I forgot to mention, I have my event specialist on here again tonight. Her name is Crystal Speed. So I wanted to, throw out some stereotypes. And I would like for all of you all to, throughout this conversation, talk about some stereotypes you've heard and how they have affected you, and just anything else you would like to say about the stereotypes. The first one that just really irritates me is the stereotype that Blacks are lazy. And, I'm trying to figure out where this one came from. I think about how hard we toiled in the US as slaves. And then, when we think about the welfare system, most of the time when we view the statistics, a lot of times Caucasian people are make up a higher percentage of those statistics as far as people who aren't working and on welfare. So again, I can't figure out it just irritates me to hear that Blacks are lazy stereotype. Does anybody have any feedback on that one or just thoughts on that one? Blacks are lazy?
So, Rosa, I don't know if you were going to say something or not.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't know you could hear me, and I was trying to just say two things about the what Reverend Vicky just said, um, which I've heard that stereotype, ones that I dislike the most as well. But I want to say first about stereotypes in general. I think it goes back to the golden rule of, and some stereotypes, like you said, they can be positive, they can be negative, and
Absolutely.
depending on how they're presented to a person dictates their reaction. And a lot of times people try so hard to disprove that stereotype, it alters their behavior and their views on certain actions in their lives. And in this instance, Black people might try to really disprove that lazy stereotype just because it's hurtful. For they, when you hear something like that and you're like, well, I'm a Black person and I'm not lazy, that's not true. And a person shouldn't have to. Most stereotypes, in my opinion, come from someone who started some sort of statistical research and ran with it totally wrong way. And I can tell you another stereotype when we give other people a chance to give their feedback on this that bothers me the most. But Blacks are lazy is one stereotype. I think me or achieve that. Whenever I'm in a new environment, work wise or anything like that, when it comes to anything, like I purposely just really stay away from any kind of social economic help because of that. Sometimes even if I need a little help, I'm just like, no, I don't want to be presented as a lazy Black person. You know what I mean? So it's definitely one of those things that it's something that it's said to you and it's hurtful and it alters your view and your actions in life, as many stereotypes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sorry, I'm trying to have problems with my camera. Okay. Um, okay. Anybody else have a comment? I'm adjusting my.
Yeah. So I do have a comment, about stereotypes in general, but yeah, that particular one in particular, yeah, it does really, as Rosa mentioned, almost causes me to like strive to like overachieve, just to show that that isn't the case, for, Black people aren't lazy. But, stereotypes in general, not only, where some generalizations have been made and then over applied to a group of people, whether it's based upon ethnicity, gender, what have you. But also, a lot of these, I think stereotypes are continue to be embraced because we haven't taken the time to really get to know like individuals, right? So it's easier to say, oh, well, this group of people is like this if you don't really know anyone in that group, right? So it's difficult, I would say, to have a broadened view if you aren't like having interactions and associating with people to help you understand that this isn't true. For that particular stereotype about Black people being lazy, I don't know if this is true or not. I'm not a historian or a sociologist, but I think back to after the end of slavery and when vagrancy laws were put into place. And, as a way to say, when Black people aren't working, we can go ahead and put them in jail. And I wonder if, who knows, if that has anything to do with this notion that came about, well, Black people are lazy anyway. And, we have these vagrancy laws that we're putting on the books in order to, motivate them to get to work, knowing that there was no work for us to have, right? And so, sometimes the stereotypes are are manifestations of like systemic issues where, you know, it may seem that this is the case, but because of the way that a system is set up, it's really becoming almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, that, you know, the opportunities don't exist in order to prove them wrong. So that's the thought that I have about that.
Right, right. Let's see. Lon, did you have a comment? Reverend Foster?
About me. I want to agree with Rosa and Crystal as far as their analysis. As far as what Rosa was saying, sometimes you have these stereotypes and then you try to overachieve and you try to, or you try to isolate. So in Crystal's scenario, she overachieves to counteract this stereotype, and maybe Rosa would isolate in order just to avoid it altogether. And I do think a lot of the Black people being lazy, that is one of my pet peeves. I've worked all my life. I wish you would have told my father I was lazy. I never was lazy. We worked, he was military. We got up early in the morning. Our beds had to be made a certain way. Everything had to be lined up in the cabinets. Believe me, we were not lazy. But that's one of my worst, that's one of my pet peeves as far as stereotypes. Black people are lazy. I think a lot of it, I think Crystal is going somewhere with this. I think a lot of it comes from Jim Crowism. Back when we were out of slavery, and maybe a little bit prior to Jim Crow, we were out of slavery, and they had the laws, the vagrancy laws, and they wanted to they put people in jail for vagrancy, and then when they put them in jail, what did they make them do? Work for free. And so it was another form of slavery. And just like the Jim Crowism and everything. So I think they wanted to keep on saying this and putting this out there so everybody would get the perception that we're lazy anyway, so we deserve the treatment that we're receiving. And so
but at the same time, we're actually
that's my opinion. What were you saying? I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just saying, you know, I understand what you're saying, but then, you know, I think about how when they're saying this, we're actually working. They were working, you know, they worked out in the fields. They worked hard out in those fields, and then, you know, when you're in jail and you have to work, you're still outside doing some kind of manual labor. So you're working hard. You're not lazy.
I'm just wondering how did they become lazy? Soon as they stopped being slaves, they became lazy.
I guess so. I guess so. Who knows?
Well, they stopped working for free. That's what it's been said.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I wanted to include Eleazar in our conversation. Eleazar, do you have any, as a Mexican American, and I mean, you were born here, do you have any, know of any stereotypes that just really irk you about your ethnic group?
Yeah, I mean, like you were just talking about, there's a lot of things that I've heard people say. You know, one of the ones that I really hate is Mexicans are dirty. I mean, I hear that a lot. And like Vicky, before we went live, we were talking about another stereotype that Mexicans live. They just gather at one house, and they pack them in there in one house. That many people live together, and yeah, I mean, you kind of say, well, that's not everyone, and but as you think about stereotypes, there are reason behind maybe why Mexicans, the ones that you've experienced or seen, are the way they are. I mean, when you look at their lives and look at where they're coming from, and you look at their experience, then it begins to make sense why you might see them as dirty, why you might see them as all living together in one place. And it begins to make sense why they might live this kind of lifestyle. And so I personally do hate those because, you know, if you do see someone who's dirty, especially a Mexican who is dirty, man, that's because, as you've all been talking about, it's because they've been out working. I mean, these are hardworking people, people who have left their countries, not because they wanted to come here and experience all of this over here, experience racism, experience living the way they do, experience working. No, they're doing this because they have no opportunities where they're from. Some of them, like in Mexico, in the northern parts right now, there are drug cartels that run all that area, murders every single day by the hundreds, and it's no longer a safe place to live. And so they come and looking for a different opportunity. And so these are people who are here to work, people here to make a better lives, not for themselves, but for their families. And so when they come over here, yeah, I mean, that's why you're going to see them, that they are maybe in dirty clothes. Why? Because they've been working all day. They've been working out in the fields. They've been working these jobs that other people don't want to do. And it makes sense that they'll pile in a room because it's easier to save money that way. And so, yeah, I mean, there's some truth to it, but that is not the way they would freely choose to live if they had a better options or better choices out there. And so a lot of these way of living comes from necessity, from where they're coming from the situation that they're in, and so forth. You can look at second generation, third generation, fourth generation Hispanics that are living here, and it's a total different situation that they're in. But still, I mean, as you guys were talking about stereotypes, it's easy just to lump people together and to say, yeah, those people are that way. And then the funny thing is when a different race finally gets to know you, they're like, well, because somebody told me this, they said, you know, you Mexicans are dirty, but not you, man. You're different. I'm like, well, what's that mean? You know, what if you just go out there and get to know these people, get to know where they're coming from, understand their stories? You might not generalize this group of people as dirty people or as people that love to live together in one house. And so it's easier to lump people together when you don't want to be around them, when you don't want to get to know them, when you don't want to actually know where they're coming from, their experience. And so that's why I think it's easier to just group them and say, yeah, that group of people over there is that way. And so stay away from them, and I'll continue to do my thing, continue to do what I want to do and live instead of trying to understand where they're coming from. Just from a biblical perspective, a biblical side of things, I think if you read scripture, you realize really quickly that scripture teaches us that all people are made in the image of God. And so there's something beautiful about that. Jesus comes and says, look, don't love your own kind. I mean, anybody can do that, but love who? Love your neighbor, love the other, love those who don't love themselves, love those who hate you. And why? Because those people over there share the image of God. They're your brothers, they're your sisters. And so love them as well, because as you love them, you're really loving yourself, because as you get to know other people, you get to understand your plight, you get to understand who you are, you get to understand where we're all coming from. We might even get to understand that, man, there's a lot of stuff in common between us. We might share the same story. We might find out that, yeah, we're all hard workers, not just this group, not just that group. We all share family values, strong family values, not just that group. We all want to do what is best for our families and get ahead in life. And so, yeah, love your neighbor. And how do you do that?
Mhm.
I would say just by getting to know them, initiating conversations. I have a lot of Hoodites here. If he took Dr. Walden's class, he would ask his class, who are you interacting with? And like, he would always push us and say, what does your doctor look like? Does he look just like you, or does he look like someone else? Something else. And who makes you comfortable? And so a lot of times, man, if I'm a Hispanic and I'm a male, I'm going to want to be around who? Hispanic and men, people that look like me, think like me, and I'm just missing out. I'm missing out if I just do that constantly. And so that's why, especially from in our seminary, there was always that push to get out of our circle and to get into other people's circles, because then you can begin to experience life even more fuller. And you begin to realize that it's not just about me and about my people, but that there is a lot of commonalities out there, and that, and from, again, a biblical perspective, that God loves us all. And again, pushing this biblical perspective is only when we come together from all these different perspectives and contexts and upbringings that we can then truly begin to experience God even more fully, because we bring all those different understandings of God and different understandings of how he works in the lives of people. If I only see him with my own eyes, then I only see one side of God. But if I can see them through the eyes of so many other people, then I can see how God is working so fully in the world. And when we stick to stereotypes, we're even limiting God and what he can do.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. That was a powerful sermon you just preached. Wow. Wow. You had some awesome, really profound points, Eleazar, Reverend Partita. Does anybody want to comment? Make any comments? And he raised a lot of different points. So anybody can jump in.
Well, I wanted to talk about the two forms of stereotype. One, it starts in your youth. As a child, you may always hear that from your parents or the closest people to you, your family, your teachers, your community, and you don't know any different. So when you hear these things and you grow up and you don't know any different, it's up to you at a certain point to go out and search the truth. But it's very difficult because this, and the other form comes to you as an adult through the media. And I'll tell you, the other form of stereotype besides black people are lazy that I really can't stand is that us black and brown people are all criminals. Um, Statistically, this is disproven all the time, but statistically, what's shown through media will support something like that. And it's, a very broad stereotype that has people really in fear of being in our communities and whatnot, because they think by nature we have a criminal or violent nature. Um, and when in actuality, when you look at who actually commits the majority of the crimes in this country and in a lot of other countries is non-black and brown people. So that's just one stereotype I've always just disliked, and I know it's supported unfortunately by the way the media shows it to us adults, or by what's taught to you as a child. Your parents may have always said that or something like that, and and that's just what you've always heard, and it's very damaging for our nation.
Absolutely. Rosie, you talked about black and brown people, are just automatically known to be criminals. For the audience, for viewers, I just wanted to mention that, that will be an upcoming topic for us. The amount of black and brown people who end up in the prison system, and just talking about prison reform, things we can do to turn that around. Let's see, Yolanda, Reverend Foster, do you have any comments?
Yes, I wanted to say, when Rosa was talking about as far as childhood, having incidents from the childhood, I do agree with that. I had an incident with a teacher when I was 5 years old. That's one of my earliest memories of actually realizing that I was different. I never knew I was different. I grew up in an integrated neighborhood. So it was whites, it was blacks, it was Puerto Ricans, Italians. I grew up integrated. So I never knew that I was different. And in my household, I grew up in a loving, nurturing household in which my parents always told us, you can be whatever you want to be. Set your mind to it. The sky's the limit. You are worthy. You are capable. You are kings. You are queens. So we always had those affirmative statements in our household. When I was 5 and I went to school, the first day I sat down in the class, and by my maiden name is Austin, so I was one of the first ones she called on the roll, and she turned around and said, "You're pretty for a black girl."
When you were 5?
When I was 5. So I really didn't know how to internalize that, because I had never faced a label. Like I said, I grew up in an integrated neighborhood with all different races. So we never identified ourselves by race or gender.
Right.
We would say you're pretty, or you're handsome, or something of that nature. When I got home, my mother asked me what was disturbing me so bad. And I told her, I said, "Mom, the teacher said I am pretty for a black girl. And I just don't understand why I have to be pretty for a black girl. Why did I have to be distinguished by gender and by race?" And so that's one of my earliest signs of knowing that, hey, when I come from the comfort of my insulated neighborhood and my insulated surroundings, there are other people out there that do not understand me or do not relate to me. And so I thought about that when I was thinking about this platform. And I said, hey, pretty for a black girl. So what are you trying to say? Black girls are not pretty? So what I'm trying to get, what was the actual meaning of that? And by me being 5 years old, I didn't know how to formulate the question to respond to that. But I knew that it didn't feel right. I knew that it didn't feel right, but I just didn't know how to formulate it. And then when I got older in 5th grade, the teacher asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, a lawyer. And I was always taught, you hold your head up high, you speak, you articulate, and you look people in the eye because you're worthy. Right. And she said, no, you can't be a lawyer because that is primarily a male's profession, for one. And then number two, that not that many blacks are lawyers. See, I'm 50 years old. So when I was in 5th grade, it was the late 70s. And so not that many Black people are lawyers. And so I went home again and I asked my family, you know, you saying we can be whatever we want to be, the sky's the limit. But every time I turn around, I'm getting knocked down and saying what I can't do because of the color of my skin and because of my gender. And I'm being defined and told what my capabilities are without them even knowing me. Like Elazar said, you know, they don't even get to know you, but they just make assumptions about you, what your capabilities and what you're able to do. So
Absolutely.
that's my perspective.
Absolutely. Crystal?
Yeah, so I appreciated Rosa talking about, you know, how both home life and the media can, you know, really perpetuate these stereotypes or these visions of, oh, all these people are one type of way. And, you know, when you think about the media and, you know, just how over, you know, time, people of color have been portrayed. The stories that are told about us, like in news outlets, are, you know, significantly negative, you know, that the way that we are portrayed, and it's gotten better, right? But still, the way that we are portrayed in certain types of media, definitely either, oh, you know, Black women are like exotic, or, you know, this kind of forbidden fruit type of thing where you can only have them like, you know, undercover type of thing, and, you know, the kind of just perpetuating all this stuff. And I think the media definitely has a large role in how people, you know, view other people, because either you haven't taken the time to get to know individuals, or, you know, just haven't had the opportunity based upon your environment to really know that this is or is not true, and questioning it versus, I mean, of course, if you look at the nightly news every night, and every night it's, you know, a Black or brown person being arrested, you see, you know, gang activity, drug activity, murders happening in particular areas, then you're going to believe, oh, this is a really big problem, but that's all they're reporting on, right? And so it's really important to be able to like call out the images that we see in the media and like misrepresentation when that does occur, and being able to kind of like hold people accountable to that. Because yes, what people are ingesting, digesting, it forms a skewed view of reality. And if they aren't questioning it, then, you know, these things just continue to be like held beliefs that then will impact, you know, the people that they interact with, like the kids that they're raising, the people that they have influence over. And so that's how these things just continue to be held as common beliefs when they, you know, quite frankly are false or misrepresented. Yeah, I think that was it. I feel like I had something else that I was thinking through, but that's what I'll say on the media right now. And, you know, it's just really frustrating. But I do think there have been, you know, strides. One, not waiting for, you know, traditional media outlets to tell the full story, but, you know, really taking the helm of, you know, people of color owning their own narratives and being able to show both positive, like really showing what is happening in the world and in communities, and being able to provide a fuller view of what it's like, and also owning, you know, if there are, you know, areas in our communities that need help and support, making sure that we give them the help and support.
Right, right. Yeah, I love what everybody's saying. I want to go back to what Yolanda was saying. Just think now, if, you know, the things that she heard, I mean, even just that one comment she heard, "You're pretty for a Black girl." She, you know, she was 5 years old. Now, if she didn't have supportive parents, you know, a loving family, that could have negatively affected her for the rest of her life. So, you know, I think it's really unfortunate that a lot of times we are victims of these stereotypes at really young ages. Does anybody else have an experience they had when they were young, like that elementary school age? Even, well, nursery school or, you know, kindergarten, elementary school. Anybody have an experience with a negative stereotype where it affected you directly? I was just curious if anyone else had that.
Well, I don't know if this is the same thing, but when I was in middle school, I went to a school. There was only, well, in the area, there was only about, I think the makeup was probably 60% blacks and 40% white people, and I was the only Latino in the
Wow.
school. And so, yeah, so I was very different. And so even for the professors, I mean, it was something, how do we handle this, you know? And so in middle school, I think it was 6th grade, maybe 7th grade, we had a kid transfer in. This kid was Chinese. And I was in a class, and this Chinese kid did not speak any English. He had just moved from China to the United States, and he came to our class. And he was in my class, and the topic of the day was, what do you want to be when you were older? And everybody was going around saying what I wanted to be when I was older. And it was his turn, and he didn't understand the question. And so the professor or the teacher turned to me and asked me, can you ask him the question? And I'm thinking, how? We're not even the same race. We don't speak the same language. But I didn't say anything because I mean, how do you say that? You're in 6th grade, and your teacher's asking you that. So I turned to the kid and I asked him in English, trying to ask him, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so, I mean, that's always in the back of my mind. I was like, what was that teacher thinking? That she would just box everybody that didn't look like her, like the people, like the kids in the classroom in a separate box, and that I'd be able to translate for this Chinese kid. And I don't know. I don't have an answer or anything for that, but that has always stuck with me. I'm like, what? I don't know. It's just, what kind of world are we living in that just people say, yeah, they're all minorities. Let's just put them in a box altogether.
They all speak the same language, huh?
Yeah. So.
You mean you don't know Mandarin?
But yeah, I guess it speaks to the kind of, at least at that time, the kind of teaching that was going on, you know, that the kind of people that were teaching as well. I was thinking as Yolanda and Rosa was talking about their experience being younger. I guess one of the ways that we can combat this is to do what Yolanda parents did, is that to speak, you know, life into her, to speak goodness into her, and to find ways to empower our little ones, our young ones, especially because they can be swayed so easily. And so to be the voice for them. And yeah, when we experience these craziness, or when our children or youth experience this craziness, for us to be able to speak positive into their lives, because they may not be hearing it anywhere else. And so.
Yeah, Eliezer, I agree. I think it's so important. You know, I am not a parent. I don't have any kids, but I did spend some time in the classroom as a teacher for 5 years, and really being able to like think about, you know, how are we building up each and every child to really, you know, have high self-esteem and also pride in who they are. The uniqueness of each and every one of us and what makes us special, and really building that up and being able to show representations of that in different ways. So whether it's, we're going to, because Yolanda growing up wanted to be a lawyer, we're going to go see some lawyers in action. And so that you can see that, yes, you can do this, it's possible. Other people have like blazed trails in order for you to do that. And seeing representation in the movies that we watch and the books that we read and, the people that we expose our kids to, I think, is really important. But so one thing that was it wasn't necessarily blatant, but like growing up as a child, my parents actually owned their own company. They were IT government contractors. And so when I would tell people, that my parents own their own company, weird looks, like, really? Like, how is that even possible? And then like, oh, is it like a barber shop? Is it a hair salon? I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but it automatically is like, and when I told them that they owned an IT company, it was just a different conversation. Like, one, puzzled looks like this is possible, but also then some curiosity, like, oh, okay, so tell me more about that and how did that happen? But I mean, that happened probably up through high school. By the time I got to college, maybe because I went to HBCU, but by the time I got to college, it really wasn't that big of a deal. But definitely growing up, people were confused as to like, how did this happen that your parents like started and owned their own company? And even I worked for my dad for 5 years, and it was also very telling when people would come to meetings with us. They would be like, okay, so who is the owner? And then when they would see the owner, they're like, and sometimes the interactions and engagement were different. Even, some of our employees, it was hard to think about having a Black boss, which we navigated it, but still, it was definitely something that was present, and just something that, it was just so common to us. Yeah, of course, this company has been around forever. It's just part of who we are. But with people who are just exposed to it, they're like, well, okay, kind of thinking that it was odd that, an African-American family could build a company like this.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah, we've definitely all had some experiences. Let's see. So you all have talked about your experiences as youth. Let's see. What as adults, what kind of stereotypes have you been subjected to in the workplace or in your churches? Anywhere? Anybody?
I think for me,
can say, go ahead.
well, stereotypes and cliches on what a certain group doesn't do as far as, your race or your gender or even the inner city culture. There's always that, oh no, we don't do that. We're, people like us don't do that. And, sometimes that's meant to hold you back, like, but I want to do that. So why can't I do that? And it's more cliche sometimes than stereotype, but it still affects you the same way.
Okay, I think, Yolanda, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, as an adult, I with job interviews. Mm-hmm. Now I would send my resume and then come for the job interview, and they look at my resume and look at me like somehow I forged this resume, and they said, you work IT, you've done this, you've done that, you just like Crystal was saying, Black people or people of color are not supposed to have certain skills. So when I applied for it was one case, they told me that the job was no longer available, but I didn't find that to be true. Why would you call me for an interview? Really? I have to laugh about it now, but at the time I'm gonna be honest, I was truly pissed. I was beyond pissed. I've gotten all dressed up in my best dress, and went down there with my stiletto heels on and my briefcase, for this job interview that you told me I had. Then I get down there and you look at the receptionist first. She looked at me and she said, let me tell blank blank, I'm not even gonna say any names, that you were here. But from the way she looked at me, I knew it was gonna be some mess. So he came out and he told me he didn't even take me to the bag, that the position had been filled. I said, do not act like a stereotype up in here. So I was very upset at that point, but that's an occasion that happened to me. I sent my resume. They talked to me over the phone. They talked to me over the phone and scheduled the interview. And she said, and she almost slipped. She said, you did not sound. And I said, I did not sound like what? What am I supposed to sound like, ma'am? And then I thought about it. I said, I must have sounded the way she said I didn't sound by the time I left out of there. That's all I'm gonna say.
Oh, so do we need to address the stereotype? Black women are always angry.
Well, that's the one I was going to talk about. I mean, because like in adulthood, I'm a very mild-mannered person, but I do feel that that is something that people are constantly like looking at, like, oh, is she going to go off? And I mean, there's no reason for me to go off if we're all doing what we're supposed to do. But I do think, that's something that I've dealt with personally, but also, dealing with other individuals. There was a particular instance where it was just a person who was a little difficult to engage with. And for my white colleagues, I said, please don't take her assertiveness for, being difficult. It was just like the way that we operate and the ways that we want people to engage, understanding that there is a little bit of give and take, and assertiveness, or like also having a particular viewpoint and being committed to that viewpoint does not mean that that person is difficult or that person is being the angry Black woman in that particular situation. Also, personality types are different. I think oftentimes, it was interesting, I was on an online conversation and someone in the comments, it was a group of Black women and it was moderated by a Black man. But, and there was all different type of women, but a man said in the comments, like, if all of them could be like her, and the woman that he was referring to was someone who, was very well-spoken, mild-mannered. She was spirited, but in a way that was accessible for him, while some of the other women were very vocal, maybe have a little boom or bass in their voice, and were very passionate. And, the conversation actually stopped to address the fact that, all of the points were very valid. And, that is exactly the type of behavior that, just perpetuates this angry Black woman stereotype, when we can be passionate, right? We can feel, very strongly about something and be assertive without being angry, so.
Absolutely. Okay, let's see. Eliezer, I have to pick on you as the only man, I guess, tonight. What do you think? Let's see, how can I phrase this? If you're around a group of women, I mean, how how do you expect a woman to react? What type of behavior do you expect to see if someone disagrees with something? I mean, what would make you think, oh, she's an angry person. She must be an angry person all the time. Does that make sense? What I'm asking? Like, what would make you think, what type of behavior or actions would make you think that this person doesn't react like other people do?
Oh, I'm not sure. I mean, like Crystal said, there's the different personalities, so there's always that taken, you know, to take that into account always. So I'm not completely sure how to answer that, other than, you know, people react and respond differently. And for me, especially as a pastor, I try to understand where they're coming from and what they're really trying to say. Try to understand the other person and what they're actually trying to say, to get to the bottom of what they're feeling, or what they're upset about, or just get to the bottom of the situation. So I'm not completely sure there.
Okay. Okay, let's see here. Okay, let's see. I want to go back to trying to think. Well, I think a few of y'all talked about it, how you know, it's combating stereotypes really begins at home when kids are young. And I know, Crystal, you said you were a teacher for 5 years. I was a substitute teacher for, let's see, 3.5 years when I was in seminary. And then for some months after that, after I finished my classes before I graduated. And I know that in today's society, a lot of these kids don't really have, you know, solid home lives. The parents might, if they're growing up in single parent households, that mother or father might have to work, you know, 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. So they're not always around. So, you know, I think about what Eleazar said, you know, he keeps stressing, you know, love thy neighbor. And that is so important. How can we, you know, really help youth in other households who might not have that solid parental base to really, you know, instill positive reinforcements in them? Anybody can answer.
Well, oh, Rosa, were you talking? I think you're on mute. If you.
Okay, go ahead. I'll wait for you, Crystal.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Well, you know, I think there are a couple different things that we can do, right? But definitely, whether a parent or just a concerned community member is really thinking about, okay, how should the school be supporting kids and like being able to understand and celebrate diversity and inclusion? And so it may be like, you know, at your local school, advocating for, well, I guess not everybody's going to be on site, but like advocating for, you know, things, representation in the curriculum, in the school library, seeing examples of like excellence across the field, you know, in all ethnic groups and, you know, in both genders, and, you know, seeing this like promoted, and not just, you know, during Black History Month or, you know, Women's History Month, but really integrating it and embedding it into your school culture, I think is really helpful. And then as a, you know, just as a person, I guess, so I go to a predominantly white church. And so part of it is, I mean, I feel like I have the opportunity to like actually share a bit about my background, experience, and culture, because I'm in community with these people. And it's a kind of low barrier, low entryway for me to be able to share, but also learn about your culture and your background as well. And I think, just being open to having those types of conversations, dialogues, and experiences where, I may be, hopefully not, but I may be like the only Black person that you come into contact with and really have an opportunity to have a deeper level conversation with. And so if that's the case, then, being open to like kind of that exposure aspect. But I would say definitely advocating in our local schools for embedding and integrating curriculum and resources that are going to help shatter stereotypes.
Okay. Rosa?
Oh, yes,
Thank
I
you.
definitely agree because a lot of times they don't have those things at home. Like Reverend Yolanda spoke about her home life. I have a personal example from my childhood where I didn't have, back in fourth grade, I'll never forget my favorite teacher of all time, Mrs. Dean. She saw something in me that made her want to teach me something about life. I really probably couldn't understand it as much in fourth grade as I understand it now as an adult. But she actually took me on just a 101 personal field trip. I don't really know why. I guess she knew a little bit about my personal situation and thought I had, a lot of things that would put in my mind a lot of doubt about my future. And so she took me actually to some brand new waterfront property. And I guess they were having open houses or something. And, thank God she took me to lunch after because this probably would have been the worst boring field trip for a fourth grader. But we saw these beautiful properties and we looked at all this stuff to me. Don't let anybody ever tell you that you can't come and look or that you can't buy one of these one day. And I think she was trying to teach me because people were looking at us like, oh, you can't afford this type of thing or something. And she
Mhm.
took me just on a personal field trip, just me, and had me tour these homes and these great properties and just said, hey, you can have anything that you want in this life, and don't you let anybody tell you otherwise. And I did notice the way we were being looked at and stuff, and it was a little uncomfortable for me then, but I don't think I really got the full extent of that lesson until I was an adult. But I'll never forget that field trip she took me on, and I just think that was very important because I probably didn't have a lot of that being taught to me in my home life at that time, and I think she knew
Mhm.
that. So that was
Mhm.
very important for her to do for me. And I
Right.
try to, whenever I meet people, if I can give some sort of encouragement, to overcome their circumstance or just any stereotype that they may be facing, I try to do the same just because of my experience.
Mhm. Okay, Rosa, do you have I know you have school age children, so I'm not sure if they're in private schools or public schools, but
Mhm.
can you think of any diversity type activities that do they all go to one school or a few different
Well,
schools?
I
Are
have
there
two.
diversity activities?
I have two groups of children. My first group of children
Uh-huh.
went through public school, but it was like a interimmersion bilingual school, and so it was really open to a lot of opportunities and different ways of thinking, I think. And that was in North Carolina. Now we're here in Georgia with the second set of children. They go to private school, and it's just as much as open, but I would like to see more multicultural education and stuff accessible, media and stuff like that. I see a little growth there, but I would like to see more, especially when it comes to the upper grade levels, and we're talking about his pet peeve from my public education. I don't feel like the history was representative of our culture as much as it should have been.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. Yes, I mean, I think all schools at this point in time, all schools need to have diverse populations in their schools as well as activities. even show and tell day or culture day. This is a day where we honor Mexicans or people from China or people from one of the countries in Africa. It's just and then like that, maybe that day or let's say that the lunch on that day would be would revolve around that culture, and sometimes it could even be like at a dance type event where different cultures come and they people from the different cultures come and show dances from their cultures, and just anything celebrating differences would be great. And then that would definitely help to eliminate some of these stereotypes that we hear about and know about.
Yes, I feel it should be more year-long exposure, not just Black History Month in February. It should be more
Right.
year-long exposure going forward. I think that really should be implemented. And it's not just for, African American history, but all history from anybody that's representative in our country and other countries. I mean, this education has been watered down for far too long when it comes to diversity.
Absolutely. Ilana, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I thought about an incident when Rosa was talking with my youngest son, and he was in school, and they actually called me from work down to the school. And my husband said, yeah, you did it. Because I'm very much into having them to express themselves. If you're thinking something, say it. If you have a question, do it tactfully, but don't sit there with a question and not say anything. It's not a stupid question. The stupid question is the one you don't ask. And so if you don't know, somebody else doesn't know either. So they were studying Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. Me being his mother, and Vicky is laughing already. Me being his mother, I have already told my children that Columbus did not discover anything. That's miseducation. He did not discover anything. That's just like coming into my house and saying, get out, Yolanda. This is my house. I'm taking your whole house over and bye. So he did not discover anything. The people were already here. So he validated that point with the teacher. At least to say they wanted to suspend him for a week. And so I had to come down to the school. And I asked him, why are you suspending him for telling the truth? And the teacher wanted to tell me that wasn't the truth. I said, ma'am, we're not going to go back and forth about Columbus discovering America. He did not discover America. It was already here. Let's move on past that point. You're not suspending my son. At least to say they did not suspend him. I threatened all kinds of suits and everything else. So they did not suspend him. But I told him after we got out of there, I said, Dion, I always tell you, you're a king. I always tell you, if you have a question, to ask the question. And don't let them ever put you in a stereotype that you are a Black man and you don't know any better, or you don't have any common sense or any intelligence. So that's one thing I was thinking about when Rosa was talking about the Columbus story. Don't get me started on the other ones.
Oh, go ahead. We have time.
Harriet Tubman and all that. Don't get me started. But I'm just saying that they need to, as far as education, yes, we need to have more than Black History Month, and we need to have education, but it needs to be the accurate education. They need to tell factual education. And they need to actually promote factual information. And one of my pet peeves is Africa is a continent. It's not a country. And if one more person says the country of Africa, I'm just going to lose it. And that's what I got to say.
You're right. There is a lot of miseducation in our country. Absolutely. Anybody else have anything to say? Stereotypes and miseducation. Anybody have any comments?
No, I mean, I just think that because, I mean, so it's interesting, I guess, maybe when you were talking before about, at the very beginning, about where did stereotypes come from, you know, the origination. And I do feel that, you know, some of it's just misinformation and stuff, but also I think part of it is, you know, perpetuating this to, you know, continue to cause divisions, or, you know, it operating within a, you know, white supremacist system, right? And so I think one of the ways that we combat it, we've talked about several, is again, you know, having the maybe courage to like step out there and like get to know the unknown, right? And I think about when I was growing up, I grew up in Arizona for 9 years. I was there. And we were right on the Mexican border. And so there was an opportunity to do a exchange program. So we, you know, went for a week to a small town in Mexico. And then in the spring semester, they came up and spent a week with us. And, you know, a pretty simple thing, you know, like a cultural exchange program, but it was also really powerful to be able to, like, you know, get close and like see right up close and personal, like how other people live, and to be able to gain an appreciation for their culture, their heritage, the traditions, and also being able to share some of mine, some that were, you know, very much unique to my family and our context and experience, and then also, you know, kind of what it means to be an American in Arizona. Got to experience a little bit of that too. But I do think, you know, the more that we're able to be open to learning from and being comfortable with the fact that, like, you know, this is a little awkward for me. You know, I'm not sure what to do in this particular experience, but being willing to learn and have a posture of like, you know, I just really want to be able to share and learn from you, and then, you know, learn from me as well. So I do think, you know, that experience as a child was really helpful. And it's interesting, I found myself in a lot of kind of cross-cultural experiences throughout the years. And I think there's a lot that you can gain, especially, so it would be interesting if individuals who are typically in the majority, like had the tables flipped, because I do think it's really interesting to be part of the minority, and to kind of see what that feels like and to navigate that experience. You know, another experience, I went to an all Korean church to preach there, and after the message, like, they had lunch, right? And I didn't know a thing about, you know, Korean food. And they're like, well, this is really spicy, so you might want to take it easy. But it was just a really nice opportunity for them to be able to show me, you know, some stuff, and also to be able to share. And I think it's important from an early age to be exposed to these instances where you're able to, like, just experience different ways of life, whether it's, you know, based on different culture or just different things that are outside of your norm, and putting yourself into those places, because that can help shatter those stereotypes too.
Absolutely. You mentioned living in Arizona. I actually lived in Phoenix for 3.5 years, and I was actually working for a company where I was doing account territory management. So a lot of my accounts, my biggest business was at shops on the Native American reservations. And as you were talking, Crystal, I was thinking about this stereotype. People think that all Native Americans are alcoholics. But that is simply not true. When I lived out there, I really got to know that culture. I got to know the Native American people. I was on, let's see, I think I used to go to 2 or 3 different reservations out there. It was 20 years ago, so I'm trying to remember. But I got to know different people from different tribes, and just I got to know their culture and just saw how hard they worked and saw how loving they were, and they embraced everybody. And so, any stereotypes that I might have heard about Native Americans before I moved out there were just totally all the myths and stereotypes were dispelled when I moved out there. That was me interacting with them and finding out who they really were. So I just wanted to mention that I lived in Arizona too, and really got to know the Native American culture. So, okay, anybody else have any experiences they want to share, or any stereotypes we haven't talked about?
It would be, well, I also wanted to just point out quickly that stereotypes that come in forms of joking are equally important to combat, because those are the ones I've always, when I was younger, kind of been passive with. Like, for instance, the Black people just eat fried chicken and watermelon kind of thing, or jump, or I mean, things that are said jokingly, they do form the same basis as the more serious stereotypes, and I think it's important to address that as well.
Absolutely. I was going to bring that up next. I'm glad you talked about that. I don't know do y'all know where these stereotypes came from? Yes, Black people are supposed to eat, all love fried chicken and watermelon. And then Eleazar, you're still on, people might think just because you're Mexican, you definitely love tacos or something. Where do these stereotypes come from? What do y'all think?
I think they're just derived from some awkward comedy, and instead of people really embracing a culture, they feel a little intimidated by not understanding it, and they just take the little bits and pieces that they know and run with. Sometimes they don't mean the damage they do, but it still causes damage.
Absolutely. And all of one type of people never, people don't, everybody doesn't do the same thing.
Right.
So, I remember when I was growing up, my parents both loved watermelon. And my mother would sit at the kitchen table and whatever, and scoop it out of her, her half or whatever, a slice and stuff, scoop it out and eat it. And I hated watermelon. I'm sure I tried it as a kid, but I just wasn't into it. First of all, I don't like things with seeds. So that was a big thing, watermelon with seeds. I wasn't interested in watermelon. As I've gotten older, I've heard that it helps with weight loss, and it's healthy for you and things like that. So I eat it every once in a while, but I can't say I love watermelon. And so does that mean I'm not Black because I don't like or love watermelon? I don't know. It's kind of weird with the foods. Okay, so somebody saw one person eating something, and then all of a sudden the whole group of, the whole race eat something. This is bizarre. Does anybody have any comments? Any other comments about a type of food or how a certain group of people dresses or dances or anything? There's so many stereotypes we could talk about, but.
Yeah, well, I do think, kind of going back to Rosa's comment about jokes that can be damaging and hurtful. I mean, I do think if we think about Blacks with watermelon and chicken, I think, part of it is, it's just become like a joke that can be demeaning, and it can be, just meant to tear down versus build up, or versus making an observation. And I think we just need to be really careful. And when I say we, I mean like all people, really careful with the types of things that are considered comedy, but are perpetuating, stereotypes, biases, and prejudice. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I think I can't remember where the cartoon came from, but in recent years, I remember seeing this cartoon picture of a white person in blackface, and then the person had like a slice of watermelon, and then it was a man in his hands, and then there were some watermelon rinds on the ground scattered around him. So like I said, I can't remember where that came from, where I saw it, but I was very offended by that. Whether I liked watermelon or not at the time. Again, it was in blackface, so it was saying, here's the typical stereotype. I'm a Black person eating watermelon, so it was offensive. So yeah, I definitely agree about some of the joking ways that people portray stereotypes. It is offensive. Anybody else? We have about 8 more minutes, I think. Yes. Does anybody have anything to add about stereotypes?
Well, I don't know. Maybe if there's anything to add, I would just be curious from other panelists. What are some ways that we can combat stereotypes? So kind of on a personal level, when we are either judged by these stereotypes or in company of others who are using stereotypes in a negative way. Like, what are some practical things that you find are helpful in addressing when stereotypes are used to put people down?
I would say to verbally negate them. I mean, I would always ask the question when someone stereotypes a group of people, well, give me an example. What person that you know fits that stereotype personally? You know,
Right.
fight against them would be the first. You hear it or someone says it directly to you.
I've actually asked people, do you know them, or have you been around them? Have you socialized with them? Have you interacted with them? When they just naturally assume certain people act certain way. And it doesn't have to be African Americans. It could be anybody that they make a comment about that I feel like is being disrespectful or not not giving that person validity as being a human. And sometimes in some cases I've heard comments and I was like, oh no, I totally disagree. Have you been around? And so most of the time they don't even say the comments around me. They might think it, but most of the time they don't say it because I'm going to say something. If I see something or hear something, I'm going to say something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know your personality, Yolanda. You will say something. Absolutely. Anybody else? Let's see. Trying to see.
Well, I really do like your guys' approach to, like, you know, being able to call somebody out and then asking, like, so what exactly has been your experience with that? And if there hasn't been a real experience with it, I think that helps prompt people to, like, maybe take a second look. Um, because of what I do professionally in HR and operations, I think a lot of times, especially like when we think about hiring people, you know, Yolanda's example is a horrible, horrible example of, you know, what happens when we stereotype and that type of stuff. But I think sometimes it's really calling out, like, what our biases or these stereotypes that we've held. And at least acknowledging, like, hey, I have this bias, or, you know, I have believed in this stereotype and I need to, like, work through, you know, letting that go. And that's done. So I think there's some personal responsibility, right? And that's done by, you know, developing these relationships and doing the work around understanding that, you know, this is a false assumption that I've held. And, you know, unfortunately, not everybody is open to doing that work, but I think it's necessary.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it, you know, Krista, what you were saying makes a lot of sense. And, you know, I just think even if we ask somebody, and well, all of you all have said the same thing, you know, to actually confront the person and say, you know, what has your experience been? Even if somebody says, they had a negative experience or saw this stereotypical behavior from one or two people, that's still not all of a certain race or a certain group. So, you know, if we really, you know, explain that and expand on it, I think that will definitely help as well. Right? Anybody else? I think we have about 2 or 3 minutes left. Anybody have any closing comments or anything? All right. Nobody has. Oh, I think somebody. Oh, Yolanda, you have something?
I just wanted to thank you for this platform. The Diversity Matters, because it's very important to have dialogue.
Absolutely.
If you don't have dialogue, everybody stays in their own little box and has their own conceptions and own thoughts. It has to start with dialogue. You have to have dialogue first before action. It's not good to just go out on action without having dialogue and making a plan and seeing where everybody's at. So this is a good platform to have. And you have a very distinguished array of panelists. So it's been my pleasure to be with you all tonight.
Thank you very much,
to have you,
Reverend Foster, for joining us tonight. And we hope that you'll come back again whenever you're available.
I will.
Okay. So we have talked about, you know, Black Lives Matter. That was our first one. Then we tried to, you know, come up with some solutions during the second one, solutions to racism, police brutality, and systemic injustices. And then let's see, the third one, I think we talked about, I think that was religion-based racism. And I'm trying to remember the fourth one. Let's see. It escapes me right now. Oh, last week, 2 weeks ago, we talked about colorism. And so tonight, stereotypes. And in the future, we will be talking about, let's see, I know we're going to talk about the educational system, the injustices in the educational system, as well as prison reform, and we will have some other exciting topics for everybody. So we hope that you all enjoyed tonight and that you learned some things about stereotypes, how to combat them, how they negatively affect people, even at young ages. And it is 10 o'clock, so we're about to end. I want to thank all my panelists, including my guest panelists tonight. Thank you all for joining me. Again, viewers, we hope that you learned a lot and that you will start having these conversations yourselves in your own homes, in your communities, in your churches, in your schools. Thank you for joining us tonight. This is Diversity Matters, and we will be back in 2 weeks. So that will be on Wednesday, August 26th. And we will be on from 8:30 to 10 p.m. Thank you. Good night.